Thank you for being at the North Carolina Bread for the World Convention. North Carolina is the only state in the Union that has annual Bread for the World conventions. And I can see from the voting records of your two senators, your representative, that these conventions are making a difference. I especially appreciate the Durham chapter of Bread for the World and their planning committee for this convention for all the work that they've done to bring you together. And then I appreciate each of you. You've chosen to devote your Saturday to learning more about hunger and related issues, how you can be an effective advocate for hungry people. So you've demonstrated already that you are an exceptional person. You're a salt of the earth person. And because of who you are, I am absolutely sure that this day together will have far-reaching impacts in the lives of many, many people who struggle with hunger in our country and around the world. I want to talk about what's happening in the administration and Congress, about how Bread for the World is responding, your role in that, and then talk about why I'm still really hopeful about the possibility of moving our country and the world toward the end of hunger in our generation. We expect President Trump and Congress to make a series of really harmful decisions for hungry and poor people this year. Nobody knows for sure how this presidency will unfold. It started with a series of actions and statements, all of them unsettling, some of them really harmful to hungry people. The increased deportations, for example, is causing increased hunger, certainly among the families who are being disrupted, sent back often to situations of poverty and violence, but also to a much broader community of people who are afraid to enroll in school or college, or afraid to take formal sector jobs or any jobs. We think that the most important harm that President Trump and this Congress are likely to do to hungry people will be financial. A long-term extraction of financial resources from communities of poverty in our own country and people who suffer from hunger and poverty around the world. This has already started. We've seen the prospects of it coming because we know what the Republican budget resolutions of the last 6 years have been. We know what President Trump's cabinet appointments have been. But now the process of cutting back on programs that are helpful to hungry and poor people has begun. I'm recording this video on Tuesday. On Monday, President Trump sent directions to all the departments of government about how he wants to shape his budget. And we know that his budget will include a major increase in military spending, and that a lot of other things will be cut in order to accommodate that. He said that he doesn't want to cut Medicare and Social Security, partly because those programs also affect middle and upper income people. So we expect the cuts to fall especially hard on programs that are good for hungry and poor people. And the White House has been clear that the cuts will be deepest for foreign aid programs. We expect the cuts, the White House said that the cuts in foreign aid may be 30%. So that started that process. At the same time, House Republicans are moving to re-reform health care, and the House leadership has been clear that they intend to put Medicaid on a budget. That's their way of saying that they're going to put a financial cap on Medicaid, a per capita cap. So what that means is that probably that cap will go down over a period of 10 years, and then healthcare costs are likely to go up. And so we know that Medicaid, which provides health insurance for people in poverty, since the expansion of Medicaid, also for some people who are just above the poverty line. We know that healthcare coverage for people in poverty, often people who are struggling with hunger, is likely to be cut back as the House works through its revisions in healthcare policy. This is just the beginning of a complicated, not fully yet knowable series of legislative actions this year. But my guess is that in the end, the president and the majority in Congress will push for cuts of something like $5 trillion from low-income people over the next 10 years. $5 trillion. These cuts will be mostly phased in, and the economy is growing right now. So they won't, the impact of the cuts won't be immediately clear to everybody. But this would be a major shift of resources from people who are already struggling to feed their families to other purposes. At Bread for the World's, in Bread for the World's board and staff, we're thinking that Bread for the World's principal role this year is to help people get to your own members of Congress and urge your own members of Congress to make financial decisions that are consistent with the possibility, the God-given possibility, of virtually ending hunger in our time. The offering of letters for 2017 will engage many churches in learning about the possibility that we can end hunger. It does seem possible. We've made a lot of progress against hunger in our country and around the world. So we want to give people that good news. It seems like it's God-given, a God-given opportunity. And then we'll be mobilizing hundreds of thousands of letters to members of Congress from Christian people back in their states and districts, urging them to make financial decisions this year that are consistent with progress, continued progress, toward the end of hunger in our country and around the world. Across the country, we're getting a really encouraging response. A lot of churches are interested in doing this. We've crafted the offering of letters in a way that it's something in which conservative people, liberal people can both participate. People out of their faith can talk about the blessing of progress against hunger in our country and around the world, and urge their members of Congress to make financial decisions that move us in that direction. And so then every member of Congress will also have to at least develop a mail-merged letter back to all those constituents saying what he or she thinks about the possibility of progress against hunger, and how that will impact his or her votes about the financial decisions that Congress and the President will be making this year. The legislative processes by which these financial decisions will be made are hard to predict, and they will be somewhat complicated. So we're starting now with health care. Congress is starting right now with deciding on the funding levels for the second half of the current fiscal year. But there'll also be separate bills on taxation, maybe infrastructure. We think a lot of it will come together in a big a budget reconciliation bill sometime later in the year. And importantly, in the Senate, if just 3 Republican senators vote with the Democrats against deep cuts in programs that help poor people, hungry people, those cuts won't pass. So over the course of the year, we're going to be looking to activists, leaders like you, people who come and study the issues and follow the issues. We're going to be looking to you to translate the offering of letters, a very general message, into specific pressure on the specific decisions that will be affecting your senators, your representative. I want to talk about your legislators. Senators Burr and Tillis and Representative Price have all voted with Bread for the World on sentencing reform. That's an issue that has a lot of bipartisan support in Congress. We don't know yet what President Trump thinks about it, but we hope that's one good thing that we can do on a bipartisan basis. All 3 of your legislators voted for the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, which Bread for the World thinks is has been an important way to encourage trade opportunities, economic opportunities for people in Africa. Senator Tillis and Mr. Price also voted with us on some budget issues. Senator Burr voted against Bread for the World's position on the budget issues that I checked on, but he is an exceptionally important senator. He is the number 2 Republican on the Senate committee that will decide on health care policy. So he's really influential on that issue. And then I just have to say that Senator Burr is chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. So at this point, he is our best chance for a strong bipartisan investigation of the relationship between President Trump and the Russian government. That's not a Bread for the World issue, but it's an issue that's really important to our democracy, important to supporters of the president and to detractors. It's important that there be a real investigation so that we know that the questions that have been raised are looked into and that we know what the truth is. We have, I think, real reasons for hope. A lot of people are discouraged or just upset. On the right or the left, people are upset, somewhat uncertain what to do. But Bread for the World's experience is that Bread for the World and its faith-grounded members and activists across the country can win change for hungry people in all kinds of political circumstances. Last year, for example, 2016, Congress wasn't able to pass much legislation, partly because our country is so sharply divided, partly because it was an election year. But guess what? In July, we were able to pass a big world hunger bill, the Global Food Security Act. I know many of you were involved in that. It's really a wonderful victory and not unimportant. It requires the Trump administration to continue what the Obama administration had been doing to promote agriculture and nutrition programs, food aid reform in the poorest countries of the world. It's a big bill, $7.6 billion over 2 years. Really quite remarkable that it passed with big bipartisan majorities in both houses of Congress. So we can do this. Bread for the World also did more election-related advocacy than we've ever done before. In the end, we had hoped that the President and Congress we got out of that would lead us toward the end of hunger. Actually, we're fearful about what the President and the Congress that have been elected, what they may do. But we were overwhelmed by larger forces. At the same time, we clearly had an impact. We got all of the presidential candidates from the major parties made statements about hunger and poverty, including President Trump. In fact, one study shows that press coverage of poverty and related issues was twice as much in 2016 as in 2008. I was struck that President Trump, in fact, talks a lot about the forgotten man, the forgotten woman, about poverty explicitly. In his inaugural address, I think he talked more about poverty than President Obama did in 2008. So, using the word is not necessarily good policies, but expressing concern about hunger and poverty is important. And President Trump is doing that. Speaker Ryan and the House Republican caucus are doing that. And those are opportunities that we can use this year now in going back to the Trump administration and to members of the House especially, and urging them to live up to their stated concerns about hunger and poverty in our country. My point is just that Bread for the World really is able to have an impact. Over and over again, we're way outgunned. It seems impossible, and people of faith take action, and we often clearly make a difference. Second, I think we can take hope from the fact that the world is making progress against hunger and poverty. The recent economic crisis was a huge setback, but we're now making progress against both hunger and poverty, both in the U.S. and around the world again. And if you look back over a period of decades, we've clearly made dramatic progress against hunger and poverty. So we're not trying to do something that's impossible. We're trying to keep good trends going. And then most importantly, God is on our side. It really is the case. Those of us who believe in the Christian gospel experience God's love for us in Jesus Christ, God's embrace for us in Jesus Christ. We know that that's an embrace for all people, including children who are now starving in South Sudan, including low-income children in North Carolina who are buffeted by the stresses and deprivations of hunger and poverty. God's love is for them as well as for us. And the God of the Bible, the God of the Bible brings that love into history so that oppressive empires are overthrown, powerful people are powerful for a day, but in the end, God moves toward justice, toward the day when people will hunger no more. It's a biblical promise. It's something that squares with our own experience of God's love in our own lives, that even in times of difficulty, in times of suffering, that we look forward to and we experience repeatedly the presence of our loving God in our lives and in the life of our nation and the world. So I talked a little longer this year than last year because I've lots going on in Washington, and I wanted to share my perspective. I wish you all the best for the convention today. I wish you God's blessings for this convention and for your activism for hungry people over the coming year. Thanks so much for all that you do.